welcome to today's episode of Velocity Kinetics. It has been a little while since we have been putting out a video, and the reason being, quite simply, I needed downtime. A lovely 2 weeks off, posted the last video at the start of May, and basically just downtime, and I can hear it, but I can also feel it in my throat. I don't know if it's going to be audible on the audio. I've also had one hell of a cold that I've just got over, and I've been finding since COVID, whenever I've gotten a cold, it's that much harder to get over the cold. You might get over the big snotty coffee bit, but then something lingers. I suppose that's probably the thing. It's the bit that lingers for God knows how long afterwards. But I suppose plus point for me, it's the first time I've had a cold since I got my flu jab last year, so it's done its thing. But what are we going to talk about today? We're not doing a Swacecast drive and talk. That's going to be another day, whatever day that is, because this bit's been recorded on the 1st of June, actually. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, actually, we're going to talk about Skoda Kodiaq. Sarah and I recently went and test drove one, so this is just to discuss what we thought. The reason why we went and test drove a Skoda Kodiaq is something I touched on in the theory is something I touched on, I think it was in the JQ video, or it might have been in the video just after it, where we're sort of keeping our finger on the pulse of what we would like to get as a new car when we're in a position to afford a new car. We are not getting anything else until we're in a bit better financial situation. Unless, of course, I happen to win one of those Rev Comps competitions I sometimes enter, or BOTB or whatever they're called, then I might have a new car then, but I'll probably take the cash alternative if that is the case. Which car it would be replacing is a question mark, because it would all depend on which car makes the most sense to be traded in. Probably the Swace, but if the Volvo makes more sense to go, then it would be the Volvo that would go. It would be a combination of what gives us the best trade-in value versus what car's got the biggest bills coming up. And 6 and 2 3s as to what's going on, because it all depends on the mileage. Mileage depends on what you need doing, timing, oil changes, tyres, so on. But also the Volvo's got extra electronics on it. It's got more things on it to go wrong, and it's just a big 2-litre engine. It's not a hybrid, whereas the Swace is. So that'll be its own completely separate thing. Now, as I explained in the JQ video, Sarah has a preference for that size vehicle because of being brought up with big people carriers for the most part. I think she said her dad had a big Volvo estate at some point, was from his late father, but she's been brought up with Toyota Previa, Kia Sedona, Toyota Corolla Verso, not in that order. I can't remember the running order, but that's pretty much what she was brought up with, whereas I was brought up with Volvo 940, 240, V70 and so on. If we were going to Skoda, my preference personally would be to get an Octavia or the Superb, because that's the way I'm built mentally. And we'll not spend too long on that if I can avoid it, whether I cut it out in the edit or whether I just try my best not to talk about it now. But you get the point. Chalk and cheese. One person's chalk is another person's cheese. One person's this is amazing is another person's what are you talking about? This is not very good at all. But Skoda is one of the few brands we sort of both don't disagree with. And if I remember rightly, when I looked at buying the Octavia before I bought the Swace, it was on Sarah's suggestion to look at Skoda. And even though the numbers were wrong on that Octavia, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to look at what is a very good manufacturer. It's part of the Volkswagen Audi group, so you've got VW and Audi parts, wide availability of everything, good build quality, reasonably good engineering, perhaps not as good as you would get on the Volkswagens or the Audis, but still damn good. Maybe perhaps a tiny bit boring in some aspects, which, yeah, maybe I don't disagree with, that they might be a tiny bit boring in some aspects. But also when you sort of circle your boy racer fantasy vehicles these days, or what you would buy a hot version of, I would have a hot Skoda VRS if they made one, or a hot Skoda Superb, although I think that doesn't exist, but you get the point. And plus, if you would like a Volkswagen or an Audi, you should always check the Skoda, because quite often you can get the same vehicle and either spend out the same amount of money but have a hell of a lot more car for your money, or buy the same car and spend a hell of a lot less. Now, the reason why we arrive at the Kodiaq is Sarah would ideally like a 7-seat vehicle. Personally, I think not, but then again, when you've got something like a Kodiaq that comes in 5 or 7 seats and there isn't an awful lot of price difference between the two, I would personally have to agree, go with the 7. Even if you're never going to use the seats in the back, you have got the option. Plus, you've got extra points to resell it later. But it's because we'd like she'd like a 7-seater. It was originally because we wanted to have a big family, and that's not happened. Utility problems, adoption issues. So we'd still like it to happen, but let's be honest, circumstance and money are against us in many ways. Sorry, I'm keeping an eye on the time because I've got to start preparing some more food at this point of the video. But also, we do like to go on holiday with her family. Not always, but we do it from time to time. And for the longest time, it's just been her dad and me that can drive. Now Sarah can drive. It basically means we don't always have to take 2 cars everywhere if we get a 7-seater car. And that's the same with when my sister and my brother-in-law visit, and when I go see my brother as well. So it's like, we don't need more than 1 car if we can. We can try and all get into one if we got the big 7-seater. Plus, it's an adequate replacement for the Swace. Ultimately, one of the apart from the JQ just generally not being very good in our opinion, one of the big bits about the JQ was, it's like, hang on, you're telling me we're buying a vehicle that's the size of a Range Rover, but I'm getting a boot that's smaller than an estate that is not as big in an estate as you could get. So the Skoda ticks that box quite nicely. We did test drive a Kodiaq the other year. We were quite close to pulling the trigger on it, but we ultimately didn't because Sarah couldn't drive. We didn't know when she passed a test, if she passed a test, if she'd be able to be insured on it. What's the point in having something that big if she can't be insured on it? Plus, it would have been buying a car that was slightly older than what the Swace was at the time. The Swace was upside down on its finance, so it would have required a big loan. It would have not been ideal all round. But it did give us a nice taste. That Kodiaq did drive quite well. It was an all-wheel drive one. I didn't realise it was a 7-speed gearbox on that one. It was a 2020 plate one, if I recall, or was it a 21? Either way, it was no more than a year older than the Swace. So it was either a 70 or a 21 plate vehicle. It was a very comfortable car to drive, so we thought we'd have a look, especially as the Kodiaq's been refreshed. So went to arrange a test drive. It was all very, very simple to arrange through Vindis Skoda in Bury St Edmunds. Did it online, had a quick conversation, and they refreshingly, rather than trying to push for a sale, they accepted the fact it's like, look, we're just looking at the moment. We would like a Kodiaq, but I've driven a Kodiaq, so I know I can deal with the size of it. The bigger question is my wife, and the other problem as well, that with the original Kodiaq that we test drove, Sarah being the height she is, we put the seat mostly in her position, probably a few more fine tweaks required. She couldn't reach the pedals, or at least she didn't feel she could. If she could reach the pedals, she didn't feel she could very safely operate the vehicle, which I don't disagree with her. I applaud the rather than the no, it's new, it's big, is what we'd like, it's what I want. She listened to reason and her own reason and went, no, it's probably not the safest thing to get. The other plus point with Skoda, if we do ever go down that route, I do know that they do some form of blue light discount. Yes, I did just say do, and no, we're not talking poo-poo, we're talking do, not do, D-O-O, or DU if you're talking boo-boo and doo-doo from the little, is it Korean comics? I don't know. Anyway, they were very accommodating with that drive. I did make my own fuck up on that test drive. At one point, I thought I'd shut the door when I was pulling away, and it didn't bong or beep at me that the door was still open. It wasn't until I turned a corner. Granted, thankfully, we're in the Skyliner car park, which was empty, and it's a very big car park, and it clipped nothing. It wasn't until the door swung open I was like, holy crap. Backtrack a point before I go on to all that. The other thing as well is we've always said, if we're going to buy an SUV vehicle, it has to be all-wheel drive. even though a Kodiaq is not exactly the last word in off-roading, the fact it can come and be able to spin all 4 wheels, so I'm just trying to block that light out because I realise it's going to look horrible on the edit. The fact it can spin all 4 wheels is a big plus. At least some of the models can. The one we drove was a 2-wheel drive one, but it was just, again, just to sight the dimensions and get a feel for it. Because I personally feel, what is the point, and I've covered this many times and probably will nearly be the channel's byline by now, I feel that what's the point in buying an SUV that can't off-road? You'd have been no better at that point you're no better off, in fact probably worse off than if you just bought a hatchback, a saloon, an estate. But also with some of the roads, what some of the roads are like where we are, we probably could do with that extra ability to spin the extra wheels if we needed to. Some of the passing points around Wellneatham and some of the back roads are atrocious, and unless they're going to be redone as part of some big rejuvenation works, massive road works, although we're now under a reform council, so no, that's not going to happen. That we're trying to future-proof, I suppose, and we're trying to future-proof in more than one way, i.e. we're trying to future-proof if infrastructure doesn't improve, but we're also trying to future-proof for what we would like to happen family-wise. And if we can have it and have it nearly all paid off by the time that happens, or paid off by the time that happens, fantastic. One less stress to deal with. But also some of the places we like to go, the sway struggles, things that like a proper all-wheel drive SUV can come with, such as a proper hill descent control. When we go to, there's a site we go to in Scotland, Craig Tara, near Ayr, which we've been to a few times. If you're unfortunate enough to be put down the bottom, I had to drop something off down when we were there once with Sarah's family. I had to drop something, take something down from our caravan that was too heavy to carry. Coming back up, the Swaif was just revving its nuts off because it just couldn't pull itself together to get up, and going down it was just like a steam train. Granted, I hadn't discovered the B mode on the gearbox. I'd use it once for something we had to go down the hill for, and it held it back a bit, but it wasn't fantastic. When I had the Baleno and we were all the way down the bottom of the site, I did once, when it was late and I knew people weren't around, I did freewheel it down, as in I just chucked it in neutral. How fast would we go? I got to 35 miles an hour before I had to brake for where I needed to turn in. So that's a level of steep, and why some form of proper hill descent control would be advantageous. And the same with some of the other sites we go to. But also, when we went to Wrighton Sands, the front end of the Baleno, we did go to Wrighton Sands when we had the Baleno, but the one that's triggered the more we need to get something higher off the floor, we went with the Swace. It had a flat parking space, but then you back down a hill to it. And there were millimetres of clearance, according to Sarah, when she watched me do it. She said, with how little clearance there was when she was watching me back it down myself, she doesn't want to know how much less clearance it had when we were both in there, plus all the stuff, all of our stuff for when for what we travelled with. And that's not very reassuring, as in that's quite scary. Oh crap, she's finished work. Right, I now need to cut this, so cut here. I might even just insert the bit of recording I did when we had the Kodiaq. You are in.
Yeah?
Yeah. What do you think?
I don't know. The thing is, though, I'm not 100% sure how you set this.
Adaptive cruise control in the shop, so that probably means this hasn't got the option for it.
Oh, okay.
That'd be my best guess.
So I'd like that, but that's the only thing. I do like it.
Your Velocity Kinetics rating out of 10?
I don't know. Probably a 7.
But you'd still want to check the...
Yeah.
Which is the Volvo you want again, the XC60?
Yeah.
Or is it the 90 that you'd really want?
Well, The 60 probably.
And the Audi?
Q5
And this is a lot more car than both of those.
put together.
In terms of snooter to tooter, and is this one of the 7-seat ones we've been given? Looks like it. They just haven't fitted any of the tonneau covers in it. What?
You were right, it was a washer fluid. Please add washer fluid.
Hey. Well, you see, you got that there.
Well, I didn't realise that's what that meant until I went into this.
So what does that feel like to adjust on the move? Or do you think that would feel like to adjust on the move?
What,
The
this?
screen, if you needed to, like to say get to your aircon.
Well, because you can press the button here.
That doesn't, I don't think that turns the aircon on and off, that just changes the direction it's going, doesn't it?
That's the volume of the air.
There's your fans, okay. That's the heated seat temp.
That's auto.
Yeah, it's just trying to do what it's doing, what the Swace was doing before I turned the auto off. It's just basically running on a standard. It's just like running on a thermostat, I think.
There you go. I don't know, it might...
How would that? How does that feel? The seat compared to when you did the long drive in to Newcastle.
I think the seat, it's more comfy.
Okay.
Yeah. I want just to turn the auto off and just press up or down.
Not sure I like the engine stop-start being there.
What, there?
Yeah, I mean, I get the logic that they're just reusing old columns.
Well,
I get the logic that...
parking brake is there.
Okay. Again, that's a weird spot for me.
And is that to open the boot?
Yeah, probably. Yep.
Oh, wow.
Could you close it from there too?
No, only goes one way.
Right. Let me go close it. Don't like the colour, but that's
the thing.
but that's by the by, and this is probably one of the more expensive colours to get it in.
Yeah.
But that's nice. That's nicely in there.
Yeah. Do you wanna drive now?
I can punt it down the A14 to get back if you want.
Yeah. Ooh, and you open the door and the seat moves back.
So it looks the same as what the Volvo has.
Yeah.
As in even down to the placement of the memory.
Mm.
And it's a 3 memory as well.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily have to... No. I don't feel like anyone's gonna have her... I mean... Those seats are quite... There's not an awful lot of space, so it'd have to be
Are they
small.
better than the last one?
It looked like it.
Right.
But I'm also thinking, I also feel that is pretty easy for me to get in and out of.
Mm-hmm.
And your mum's not much shorter than me. My mum's not.
Yeah.
For my cut.
I suppose I suppose if you're insistent on the 7 seats,
Yeah.
on the next car having 7 seats, this is basically
I
it.
think I want the 7 seats because it gives us the bigger boot space.
Well, the other thing is, it's like this can come with the 7 seats, so why would you? It's sort of a why would you not? Just got to keep an eye on the time because we've got a few minutes before we need to go back.
See, that boot space. That is huge.
I'd say I would.
And without the seats, you'd have to.
I'd have to check the specs on this on paper, but I'd say visually that is visually bigger than the Swace.
Yeah. Right. Do you want to get in?
My turn.
Your turn.
Oh dear. I'm driving an SUV. I don't like it.
Christopher, you drove one before.
That is my wife telling me off again. So I picked this up a few days later. Things have changed. On that previous video I was sweating buckets because it was so hot. Today I nearly need to put my heating on. The brilliance of summer in the UK. So let's talk about that Kodiaq in a bit more detail. So when Sarah drove it, she drove it first. More because I've driven a Kodiaq before. I more or less know how it feels to drive. I didn't dislike it. Not my favourite thing to drive, but I didn't dislike it. And I could get on with the dimensions of the vehicle. It was more for her to see if she could get on with the dimensions of the vehicle and if she could even position herself correctly to drive it with no problems. Now, I didn't sit in the back of the Kodiaq because we were allowed to go out on our own, so I don't quite get why JQ wanted someone with us, but that's by the by. When Sarah drove it, it didn't feel like she was correcting herself as harshly, or if she was putting in the same steering input, the Kodiaq was a lot more compliant. It was smooth. It was a soft ride. It was a bit odd being that high up. Got to get used to that, but it's not the end of the world. It's something that you can easily get used to. I suppose it's the same thing with any new to you style vehicle. So she drove through. I thought she was going to hop it up on the A14 to see what it's like getting it up to speed. She didn't, but she did try and get it to about 40-45 miles an hour on a couple of roads we were on. It's a bit too much traffic at the time of day. We were out and about, but it was she at least got it well on the way, and it didn't seem to hesitate. It wasn't slow in responding. She found it easy to park. We went to the Skyliner gym in Bury St Edmunds to park it, because usually that car park during the day is quite empty, and it's a favourite with driving instructors quite often, because it's quite empty, quite big, and you can park without too much bother, which is where the walk around of the car happened. The column shifter is not for me. Well, I say shifter. It's not like an old school 3 on the tree type situation. It's more like your drive position. So are you reverse, neutral, or drive? And park being on the end makes more sense. But then there's also sport mode, which brings on the paddles. Sarah just drove it in normal sport mode. Drove it in normal mode. Sorry, I drove it in sport mode, not because I wanted to give it some, but the last one I drove, I didn't realise it was a 7-speed, so I wanted to see how many gears it had and how long or short the gears actually felt. The steering, I will say this immediately about the steering in the Kodiaq. I felt a lot more that I could feel what the car was doing. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not a driver's car, but I think I've been thinking about this for a couple of days whilst I've been trying to think to what I want to say on this. And I think the reason why it felt better to me versus the JQ is the JQ steering had no weight to it. The Kodiaq steering had some weight to it, had some meat on the bone. Whether that's just electronics falsely putting weight in there, whether that's because actually the tyres and wheels on it are quite heavy to turn, compared to whatever JQ have done, I don't know. Frankly, I don't care. It was a nicer feeling. Steering wheel felt nice. The paddles felt nice. I didn't actually pay attention to whether they moved with the steering wheel or not, which is an added bonus if they didn't, because in my Civic, the paddles for that moved. So suddenly you might be on lock, and then suddenly you want a gear, and you're in the wrong position for finding a gear. So it felt nice. The seat was quite comfortable. I got myself in a nice position quite quickly. Interestingly, and I don't know whether it's a Volkswagen Audi group thing or whether it's a Skoda thing, but interestingly, Skoda's power memory seat has 3 memory options. And the reason why I mention this is people go, well, so what? people have modern relationships. Could be, well, actually, I won't say what I could say here, because whilst I might think it's funny, it could potentially insult a lot of people. But you get my drift. People have got older families, children might be driving, grandparents might be driving, might be sharing a car. You've got 3 options, whereas newer Volvos that I know of, and I believe my dad's Kia Niro was the same, only had 2. I don't know why I've done it that way, because in England that means something rude. It had 2 positions. Again, some people go, and if you're bouncing between 2 drivers, it's not a problem. If you've got the sort of disability like my dad's got, and you need the seat to be basically in manufacturer position to be comfortable or to get out, you're a bit stumped. Whereas in my Volvo, whilst I say his current XC40 is a two memories, that's not how Volvo have always done it. It's been 3, and the way my dad always did it on his 3 memory ones was whichever position he preferred. I think he was memory number 1, was put it in his position. Memory number 2 put it back into the factory position, and memory number 3 put it into my mum's position. So then basically it was then whoever got out the driver's seat. My mum tried to keep doing it when she did drive it, more because just to get in the habit and make sure the seat was back in the right place. But in theory, whoever's driven, stop, press number 2 to put it back into default position and get out. And the same in my current V40. And Sarah and I have done the same thing. The only difference is I don't bounce it back and forth. Not always, at least. Between factory default and myself. It's typically only when it's somewhere tight that I've parked and I think I might need a bit more room to step in. But that, again, that's by the by. But it was interesting that it was 3 memory, which is an added bonus. Sarah and I would like to have the power seat. It was good to know it was there. Nice seat, comfortable to adjust, easy to adjust, more or less where I wanted to be quite quickly. There was something missing for my liking on that seat, but it might just be that I'd have to get used to Skoda seats as opposed to my Volvo seat. My Volvo's got some sort of extra bolster sort of around the lat area on your back, which I quite like the feel of, and I think my Honda had something similar. The Skoda didn't have that, but I'm sure I could find it. I didn't feel as uncomfortable in it as I did in the J-Coupe. I didn't feel uncomfortable in the J-Coupe, but I felt a hell of a lot more comfortable in the Kodiaq. That's probably the best way to put it. The boot, massive, not as big as it could potentially be, as in, lowering the centre of gravity trying to lower the centre of gravity for miles per gallon and things. If it had a taller roof, it could be a even bigger situation. The rear seats are easy to operate. The back seat was quite comfortable, even in my driver's position. And I'm not the tallest. Granted, I'm not the tallest of people. There was ample room behind me. Ample room. So it's a very accomplished vehicle for what it is. It's a very nice vehicle for what it is, and it probably will be the vehicle we go for whenever we get in a position to replace. The big problem, if you're in a position to buy a new one, is they are very, very expensive. Now, there's a special edition one they brought out for 10 years of the Kodiaq. I didn't realise the Kodiaq had been around that long. But it does kind of make some sort of sense. From memory, it does sound about right. That particular one, once I've put on the options Sarah and I would like, granted, if I take off the roof box that I'd spec'd, more because it's just like, well, how often do you get a roof box that you know is going to fit the car? And the roof rails, if I took those off, which is about £1,000 in options, the car still is the thick end of £50,000 brand new, and that's not paying for any special paint. Granted, that is the all-wheel drive one. Now, if you don't need or want all-wheel drive, you can get them, and they do come in under the luxury car tax bracket, which I believe is £40,000 at the moment. So it is doable, it is affordable, and it is within, as we mentioned, the Everyman car videos last year, it's within that tier. Sort of be your next level up from the Superb. So the touchscreen in the Kodiaq was also very good for a touchscreen. A lot of the main buttons that you would want did have physical buttons as well, which was quite good. Your heated seats were on a button. You could do bits with the aircon on a button or on the touchscreen. It wasn't immediately clear to me which was which, as in whether one overrode the other, but the options did appear to be there. Still seemed a little too touchscreen heavy for me. It did have, and it's one of these things, because I wear contact lenses, and in turn in the summer when I drive, I wear sunglasses. whereas these normal glasses have reactor lights in, so they tint themselves. I always have a difficulty of where to put my sunglasses. I either leave them out and then come back and get my nose burned, basically, from the nose pads, if it's particularly in the heat we're having at the moment, or I have to put them away in the glove box and then reach over Sarah to do so. It did have quite a nice little sunglasses cubby, and it was out the way. It wasn't going to bash my head or anything, especially if you accidentally pressed it open if you were frantically trying to look for something. Doors, despite it being quite a big car, the doors weren't as heavy as I feared. The electronic tailgate was nice. So yeah, the electronic tailgate was quite nice. It wasn't a stupid speed, as in it wasn't so slow or stupid fast, but it was okay. It would be something I would have to get used to if I bought the car, but I would freely say, and I think Sarah would probably admit this quite freely, the tailgate's probably too high for her if it wasn't electronic. I didn't check and see if it had that smart motion thing on the bumper. Reversing camera nice and clear. The lines bent as you turn the wheel. Not an uncommon thing on cars. In fact, I find it weird that my Suzukis have had it and they have the lines, but they don't bend. I sort of don't get the point in that. But there we are. Sure, there's some logic in there somewhere. It struck me as a very good family vehicle. Very practical, very rugged, very tough. As mentioned in the other part of the video, I probably would buy the 7-seat just because it can come with 7 seats and I've got that flexibility and can be the person who takes everyone everywhere if we needed to do so. It pulled quite well. So the route I then took after we finished at the finished walking around it at Skyliner. One, as I think I mentioned or touched on the previous bit of the video, I hadn't shut the door properly when I took over. So the door just swung open and the car did not beep, it did not bong, it did not make whatever other R2-D2 sort of noises you could think it could make. Zero warning that I'd left the door open until it swung open. Thankfully, we were in an open bit of the car park, no posts, no other cars. That would have been a very expensive foobar on my part if I hadn't cottoned on to it. What a mess that would have been. But what I then did is I went from Skyliner. I then went a bit further up the estate towards Rougham and then took a side road across to then get back to the A14 so I could feel it get up to speed. It was very quick at getting up to speed for something that big. I think part of me's found hard to process with these a lot of these bigger SUVs, and not as in, oh, it's an SUV, anti-SUV. Nothing like that at all. They're that much bigger and that much heavier, but they don't struggle that as much as you would think getting up to speed. I'm not expecting it to be like a little Honda Jazz driven by an old lady. They're not quick. You want quick by an M car, an RS4, so on and so forth. But they're not slow either, and it didn't feel too high. The cruise control was quite easy to set when I sussed it out. It's not as intuitive of a cruise control. I suppose my main criticism of it is, unless you've driven something like an Audi, and I'm going to assume it's similar across the whole VAG group, that when most cars, at least most cars I've driven, and most cars I've been passengers in, normally you've just got your indicator on the left, you got your washers on the right, and that's it. Unless you're like the Honda and got paddles, then you've got the paddles there too. But the Skoda, obviously, it's got the column gear selector near the windscreen wipers, but out the corner of your eye, where the cruise control is down here, sort of on its own little stalk. And I'm sure that has its benefits, but I kept accidentally nudging it when I wanted the indicator. And I'm sure over time I would get used to it, perhaps. But the fact that I felt like I wasn't making any wasn't learning, sort of indicate to me that it's in the complete wrong place. Like I said, I'd have to own something VAG group long term to see if I actually overwrote it, because it's not a Kodiaq unique thing. The Superb's the same, the Octavia's the same, Karoq, the Enyaq, and even in Audi, let's say Audi, the A4, the Q5 that I drove a couple of years ago were the same. So, you know, that seems to be their quirk. Deal with it, I suppose, would be what some people would say. It was a bit weird from that, but like I say, it had nice road presence. It didn't feel too big. I was able to keep a fairly good gap to people. Getting into 7th was quite nice, although it did override me quite a lot about what gear it wanted on the way up. On the way down, it was almost the wrong way round. On the way down, it felt like it should override my choice. On the way up, it should let me have my choice. But maybe it was just working off how other people had driven it previously, and in turn it had sort of learned, so to speak, an odd way of behaving. So yeah, that was that. It was easy to park back at the dealership. Parking sensors were very loud, far louder than my Volvos, and my Volvos aren't exactly quiet, but it is what it is. They are what they are. The sunroof on it was quite nice. There was just a lot to like about the Kodiaq, but I still can't help but feel, apart from the 7-seat part of it, I still feel I'd be happier with a Superb. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad SUV. It's one of the few I would actually have, so long as it had the all-wheel drive on it, just to help it out a bit. Like I said, if I wanted to do proper off-roading, that's where you buy your proper Land Rover Discoveries, the Range Rovers, your Defenders. That's the big daddy of them all, really, isn't it, for off-roading? Although I think one of the other quiet big daddies now, but it's not been long gone off sale in the UK, slash if it's even sold globally, would have been the Mitsubishi Shogun. For years that was also a king at off-roading. But anyway, it's not something you buy for... If you want to do proper off-roading, no, it's not what you buy. Like I said, I just want one with all-wheel drive, because the places we like to go, it'd be nice to have the reassurance. If we needed the extra grip of spinning all four wheels, we've got it. And then also, for me, it's also a case of, and then I've got a justification for having an SUV, because it's all-wheel drive. If you're going to buy, in my opinion, if I was going to buy, I suppose the best way I would sum the Kodiaq up is this. It's a nice car, very well built, brilliant road manners, quiet on the motorway, got a good bit of punch in it as well as it needs to, could carry a house in it nearly. But its biggest problem is the Skoda Superb. Because if you're going to buy a two-wheel drive Kodiaq with 5 seats for a big boot, why don't you save yourself some money and get a Superb? And whilst I haven't got the purchase prices to hand, you would save money by virtue of the fact the Superb is a more aerodynamic vehicle. You'd get more to the gallon out of it. If you want to go 7-seat and potentially want to spin all 4 as part of that, then, or at least you want something 7-seat, you can't argue with the Kodiaq. One of the few 7-seat cars on the market. It wasn't until I was looking relatively recently. There's no such thing as a people carrier anymore, really. There's no really about it. I think the only thing that might be left is a Volkswagen Charan, I think, if that. Will we end up with one? I've got a suspicion Sarah would... Oh, I asked Sarah, and I can't remember... at this bit of the video, I'm working off memory here. I did ask Sarah whether she would want the Kodiaq over an XC60, and she really paused at that point. Because the XC60 is sort of her attainable dream car. I don't know whether it's just flat out dream car. I'm not fond of the phrasing dream car, because so many automotive YouTubers, and particularly, I hate to cite them again, but it is true, a lot of people on the Auto Alex subreddit do point this out. Auto Alex are terrible for saying that whatever they bought, their dream car. Bought myself a Renault, it's my dream car. Bought myself a Porsche, it's my dream car. But anyway, the Volvo XC60 is what I would call Sarah's attainable dream car. So could we afford one? Potentially, eventually, yes. It's not out of the realms of possibility. For me, a dream car is something that's sort of a bit out of the realms of possibility. We've got to do all sorts of wheeling and dealing to it to get it. But she said she would be extremely happy with the Kodiaq. The only caveat she had to that is she would eternally be thinking, what if she hadn't test driven the XC60? So next on our to-do list would be to test an XC60 to see whether she likes it enough to insist on the XC60. I'd be happy with an XC60 because it's a Volvo, and I love a Volvo, although I far more love a Volvo estate, but Volvo is Volvo. The XC90 is out of the question because we're pretty sure the one she sat in the showroom, we're pretty sure she couldn't reach the pedals, but it was also, I think that XC90 had been sold, so she was reluctant to keep fiddling with it, which I understand that mentality. But the Kodiaq, from our perspective, I think it is very likely going to be the next car we purchase, assuming something doesn't come up that requires an immediate exchange a vehicle like the Honda did, where I haven't got the money to put anything in. It's got to be for the value of whatever I'm trading in. When that'll be, I don't know, because we've both got a couple of big personal loans. We're getting there, getting them paid off. It all depends on what the family's like at the time, what social life we've got at the time, what hobbies and things we've got, what work is like. So there are a myriad of things that could happen. I suppose the other thing as well is, one, because her loan's due to be paid off well ahead of mine, is for a brief period, do we just use what the money she was paying off her loan to overpay mine to get mine gone, and then save a bit for a little while? But I suppose it also depends on, do we need a new house? Have we got children, mortgage, and so on? So unfortunately, there's a lot of life to get in the way. But on paper, in theory, Skoda Kodiaq, solid choice. Solid choice. Not my cup of tea. But if Skoda gave me one, just gave me one, I'd defend it. I wouldn't sell it. Which, for someone who hates SUVs, and it's not just because, well, you're getting a free car, it's like, no, it's a good car. It's a good car, and I'm not so anti-SUV that if they gave me one for free, I'd be flogging it to We Buy Any Car or trading it in for something else. If Skoda were feeling generous enough to give me one for free, no catches, I would defend it. And I would keep it. So that's the end of this little discussion on the Skoda Kodiaq. Hopefully, weather turns back to be a bit nicer shortly. But drive safe, look after yourselves. I'll see you next time.